Chapter 6. What do we do now? The only ones who seemed able to function at all were Robin and Homer. I had the shakes badly, and as much as I'd tried to stop them, I didn't seem able. Kevin was lying on the ground. His face was grey. I'd only seen that colour in a human face once before, when I'd visited Mrs. O'Meara in hospital just before she died. She was 88 years old. Fee was back behind us, in the bush, hugging a tree and crying quietly. Lee was sitting on the ground with his head between his knees. I couldn't hear his face and wasn't sure that I wanted to. Compared to the rest of us, Homer and Robin at least looked like they could still move and think. It was Robin who'd asked the question, but Homer who answered it. Down the well. Eh? It's our only choice, our only chance. Listen to me, everyone. We've got to make this work. Kevin, did you make up a dummy like we told you? Kevin seemed to take 5 minutes to understand the question. 5 minutes more to respond. Then he slowly nodded. We stuffed my work clothes with pillows. And what happened? Kevin spoke like an old man, a tired old man. He was slurring his words. It worked. They looked down there with the torch and they saw it all right. Then they tried to lower one of my mates on a rope, but he started yelling about the fumes and acting all crazy, and they had to bring him back up again. Good, Homer said. That's perfect. Quick, everyone, help carry this guy. Fee, you bring his gun, then come back here and clean up the area so there's no sign of a struggle. Because we were too slow to move, he got angry with us. Come on, damn you all, get a bloody move on. We shambled towards the body and struggled to get a grip on different parts of it. Kevin tried to help but turned his face away in revulsion and let go of the feet which he had been holding. The four of us struggled with the ghastly, stinking thing into the little courtyard. With Homer directing, we manoeuvred it towards the well. It had been left open, but our problem was to get it down the shaft without falling in ourselves. He was a lot heavier and a more awkward shape than the sheep. Just as we nearly had it in the right position, Homer missed his footing and had to let go of the man's head. It dropped onto the rotting stonework with a horrible crack that must have almost split it open. I had the sick thought that if he hadn't been dead already, we would have killed him again by doing that. Robin gave a sob and lost her grip. Homer was furious. He yelled at her. It doesn't matter, I said. Pick him up again. When we were all sure of our footing, we gave it a heave. It slid forward over the brink of the well, caught for a moment by a bit of clothing, then came free, and with a floppy rush kept sliding and went over the edge, dropping into the depths. I waited for the splash, but it didn't come. It might have jammed halfway down, I said. Do you know where there's a torch? Homer asked Kevin. Kevin thought for a moment, then nodded. Okay, go and get it. Hurry, he yelled. When Kevin moved away too slowly, Homer turned to us. Now, he ordered, we've got to make it look like he slipped and fell in. Fee, chuck his gun on the grass here, like he threw it forward when he felt himself falling. Then go back and clean that spot where we had the fight with him. Lee, go and check the route we brought him in by. Clean up any tracks and any mess we might have left. Let's fake it here, I said, pointing to a place where the stonework was especially bad. If we deliberately collapse a few stones into the well, like they broke away when he stood on them. Yes, good. Kevin reappeared with the torch. I took it from him and lay full length on my stomach to peer down the shaft. It sure was a deep one, much deeper than any around Wirrawee. Even with this strong torch, I could only see in the distant black depths a couple of vague, bulky shapes that could have been human. The fumes were weaker than they had been, but they were already starting to make me dizzy again. I pulled back. Well, Homer asked. Well, I said, remembering an old joke. Why was I the only one who ever seemed to want to make jokes at times like these? I must have been sicker than even I thought. Homer just looked at me like I really was sick. It's not bad, I said quickly. I think the soldiers landed on Kevin's pillows. It's hard to see. I guess the sheep's under all that. Sheep? Kevin asked, staring. We dropped a dead sheep down there yesterday, I explained, to provide a nice smell in the coming days. Otherwise they wouldn't get sucked in by the dummy. Plus, it'll discourage them from trying too hard to get you out. He gave a little grin, probably the weakest grin I've ever seen, but it cheered me up to see that much. Lee and Fee came back. All done, Lee said quietly. We found this. He produced a soldier's cap. Good, Homer said. He put the cap on the grass, just beyond the decayed stonework. Think it'll work? He asked Kevin. Kevin nodded slightly. Probably. This bloke was such a dropkick. It's the sort of dumb thing he would do, go peering down the well for a thrill. And because the other sentries thought he was a dropkick, they mightn't waste much time investigating. They all hated him. It's out of our hands now anyway, Homer said, flatly. There's nothing more we can do. Put the torch back and we'll get out of here. No sooner said than done. The time was only 10:45. I couldn't believe so much had happened so early. We still had a full day in front of us. Gee, by 5 o'clock we could have killed another dozen human beings if we really set our minds to it. Kevin wanted to bring a few of his most precious things, but we were unanimous in turning him down. It was tough, very tough, but we didn't dare take the risk. If they notice a single thing missing, then you're stuffed, or your family is, Homer said. We all might be if they come after us, I said. You'll just have to hope your mates keep them for you till after the war, Lee said. That didn't seem much of an offer to any of us, but it was all we could suggest. To a lesser degree, it was going to be tough on us too, because we'd have to share the precious things like food and warm clothing. We had a bare minimum as it was. Anyway, wasn't it Kevin who'd stopped us taking lots of extra stuff into hell when we first realized we'd been invaded? No, it was Homer. Sometimes I got worried that my memory was falling apart. With our packs on our backs and only Kevin unburdened, we set off. Homer was in the lead. He set a cracking pace, but we knew why, and no one raised a murmur. There was no time for shock or horror or grief from the killing. We just had to get our butts a long, long way from there if we wanted to keep our butts attached to our bodies, which we all did. At least, I assumed we did. A couple of us looked like they couldn't care much either way. We didn't stop for lunch, but ploughed grimly on, no one talking, heads down, human pack horses on a long trek. In the back of everyone's mind was, I'm sure, the thought of Kevin's family, whom we'd put at risk by our actions. No one suggested that we stay and spy on the soldiers and watch how they reacted when they found one of their number missing. It might have given us some peace of mind if we'd seen them accept it was an accident, but the risk was too great. Anyway, we'd given up hope of peace of mind a long time ago. Late afternoon, we stopped for a snack and a toilet break. I was terribly hungry, and I'd been getting annoyed with Kevin because he hadn't even offered to take a pack for anyone yet. Fair enough, he was depressed. In shock, I guess. But so were we all. And these packs were heavy, so I dropped a few hints and he made a few sarcastic comments, and then I told him I wouldn't let him carry my pack if he paid me, and so it went on. Typical enough stuff when you're tired. I was secretly grateful when Robin stepped in and told us to grow up, and then worked out a rough roster which meant we'd all get an occasional break from carrying a pack. The bush was thinning out again and we realised we were approaching cleared country. This was bad news for us as we would find it much harder to stay unseen, especially now that colonists had spread so far and so fast across the state. Electricity seemed to be on again everywhere. It was another problem. Every house was an island of light at night times. Suddenly, at around 7 o'clock, we came to the end of the scrub. Without a word being said, we all dropped our packs. We were standing on a slight rise. In the last of the daylight, we saw beautiful, rich green plains stretching ahead of us. The kind of country that makes your mouth water, the kind of soil you could eat. But of course, being so productive, it was dotted with little clumps of houses everywhere, all with lights on. We could see the road that followed the valley we'd been in. About 2 k's further on, it joined a major road, a bitumen one, that came across country from our left. Where they met was a small village. with maybe a dozen houses and a service station. There was occasional traffic on the road, 2 cars and a truck during the time that we were watching. There probably hadn't been much more traffic than that in peacetime. "We're losing this war," Homer said flatly. "Tell me something I didn't know," Kevin said. I knew what they meant. Everyone looked so normal, so typical, just the way it always had been. It was like nothing had changed. Oh sure, there'd been a minor hiccup, a slight change in the way things were run. And sure, maybe different people were doing the running, but nothing important had changed. The birds still flew, the wind still stormed, the rivers still made their way to the sea. The land hadn't changed. "We have to keep going," Robin said. I knew what she meant, too. We'd have to keep walking most of the night, and maybe all of it. We couldn't travel by day in this kind of country. Darkness was the only safe time for people like us. We'd have to find somewhere safe to rest up during daylight. That would be difficult and dangerous, but we had no choice. Of course, Robin, being Robin, was talking about more than how long we should walk. In a sense, though, this night travel suited me. I was feeling more comfortable at nights. The longer the war went on, I had always associated the darkness of night with scary things. It was a time of foxes and dingoes and feral cats. It was a time of witches and goblins, of vampires and werewolves and ghosts. It was a time of evil. That was why it suited us. On the other hand, on this particular night, it didn't suit me at all. I was so very tired, so utterly exhausted. I was all in. I knew I couldn't go another step. I hated Robin for saying that we had to. I waited for someone else to say something, though. I had too much pride to be the one. Then I realized no one was going to say it. Either way, they had as much pride as me. Either they had as much pride as me, or else they weren't as tired as me. Grimly, hating them all, I shouldered my pack. "Not yet, Ellie," Homer said gently. "It's still too early." "You're unbelievable, Ellie," Fee said in quite an admiring voice. "I don't know how you do it. I couldn't walk another step. I've got to have a rest." Ellie could walk all week," Lee said in the same tone Fee had used. I did feel a bit better then. I didn't confess how wrecked I was. Let them keep thinking I was Superwoman if they wanted. I knew the truth. We waited another hour, not talking, each alone with our thoughts. It was no secret what we were thinking about. I stole a glance at Kevin. He was staring into the distance, lips trembling as though he were reliving every moment of it in his mind. I wondered about his reactions. How did we seem to him now? How much had we changed? I knew we'd changed a bit, of course, but after seeing the expression on Kevin's face when we killed the soldier, I began to wonder if we'd changed more than we realized. He'd looked at us like we were creatures from another planet. Well, at least I knew that wasn't true. We weren't creatures from another planet. We were just creatures from hell. Eventually I was the one who got everyone moving again. It was because of those dumb comments about me being so strong. I wanted to live up to them now. Plus, there was another reason. I never liked it when Homer took command too much or for too long. I always had to assert myself when that happened. I've always been that way, even when we were little kids. Lee and Robin were asleep, but they got up when I prodded them. That was one advantage of our way of life. We'd become used to sleeping in short snatches and breaking our sleep to do sentry duty. Everyone except Lee shouldered a pack, and away we went. That was the start of a horrible night. Fair enough really, to follow a horrible day. I don't know that I've ever been so tired. We just went on putting one foot in front of the other. Minute by minute, hour by hour. First my feet started hurting, then my calves, then my back and neck. My head dropped lower and lower. I soon gave up the occasional effort at conversation. Plod, plod, plod. My muscles ached, my joints ached, my bones ached. I must have spent an hour just thinking about what I could sacrifice from my pack to lighten it. It became a wonderful dream, the thought of having a pack that was 2 kilos lighter. It seemed that life could offer no sweeter promise, no greater hope. I weighed up the advantages and disadvantages of every item I carried, trying to decide what I could dump. I was sure I'd be able to find something, but really, there was nothing. Everything had its uses. I couldn't bear to think of doing without any of them, so I kept going. 11 o'clock came and went. We walked on. Hours later, I looked at my watch. It was 11:12. I could have cried with disappointment. I felt so cheated. Eventually midnight passed and we staggered into the next day. That was 3 hours of my life just gone. I thought, 3 hours I'll never have again. I'm 3 hours closer to my death, and all I did in those 3 hours was walk. I knew my steps were getting shorter, and I knew it would be to my advantage to take longer steps. If I could cover an extra 20 centimeters with each step, I'd be less tired. I knew that, but I couldn't do it. Instead of my steps getting longer, they got shorter still. Light rain started falling, and at first I welcomed it because it felt refreshing, but then my clothes got damp and sticky and heavy. I got too cold. The first trickle of cold water down my neck was horrible, as though an icy snail was slipping down my bare skin where I couldn't reach it. I think I started crying with exhaustion, but I couldn't tell because of the raindrops. I did hear Fee sobbing behind me, and I ignored her because I needed all my energy for myself. I didn't dare spend it on anyone else. As 1 o'clock approached, I kept gazing greedily at my watch. It was just luminous enough to give a reading. I thought that if I could make it to 1 o'clock, something special might happen. Nothing did. My boots started squelching as the waterproofing began to fail. I tried singing 10,000 green bottles in my head, but got bored with it. At some point, Robin tried to get everyone singing. She did a solo of Are You Lonesome Tonight, which was too depressing. Then a solo of Smoke Curls Up Around the Old Gum Tree Trunk. Then she started, not for the first time. Then she gave up. We stopped not long after that so Fee could go to the dunny. Then I realised I had the toilet paper and I didn't know where in my packet was. It seemed to take half an hour to find. I dug deeper and deeper in the pack, getting everything messed up, letting the rain get in before finally realising it was in a side pocket. Misery soaked through me and I threw back my head and howled. No one seemed interested. No one seemed to care. Can't we camp here somewhere? Kevin whined, peering around him in the darkness. No way, Homer said. We're still in wide open country. We've got to press on. There was a grim silence. When Fee came back, we picked up our packs and got going again. The further we went, the colder I got. I lost feeling in my feet. All I knew was that they were terribly heavy and seemed to take more and more effort to pick up and carry forward. My head ached and my nose was running continuously. Sniffing didn't stop it and the snot got mixed up in the rain running down my face. My legs were numb too. I didn't have the energy to lift my arm to look at my watch, and it probably wouldn't have been readable anyway. The further we went, the more trouble I had keeping a straight line. I was vaguely aware that I was wandering all the time, but didn't seem to be able to do much about it. I had no idea who was leading, but assumed it was Homer, who had a compass. For once, for one of the very few times in my life, I couldn't match it with him. When we stopped, I was too tired to feel any relief, too tired to feel anything. I stood there waiting to be told what to do. For all I knew or cared, we might have run into a patrol. After a few minutes, Homer came out of the darkness and reached for my hand. I gave him the wet, cold, heavy thing. It must have been like picking up a dead fish. Come on, Ellie, old mate, he said warily. I let myself be led like a helpless child. We walked for about 5 minutes to a building. I realised suddenly that it was a wheat silo, one of the big concrete ones. I didn't care what it was, but I remember thinking that it was a good choice of shelter, because colonists wouldn't be interested in it until harvest time in midsummer.